Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we're back with another Total War Warhammer video, near about the end of our What's Missing series, and now we're looking towards the Lizardmen. The Lizardmen themselves have received a decent amount of attention throughout the majority of Warhammer 2, a number of DLC, some FLC and so on. The only thing that I'd say is the big issue is that they do need a bit of a rework to make them more viable. Stuff like sieges and so on are a bit of a pain, but I'm imagining that Warhammer 3 will fix that with the siege rework, at least I can hope. That being said, they are missing a few things, which is a bit of a shame. However, obviously DLC like cross-game DLC is very possible in Game 3, as it did become more popular in Game 2, so hopefully we're seeing more of that to be able to finally flesh out all the factions and finish them off once and for all. With that being said, there's a few things that we need to talk about, so let's not waste any more time and jump right in. We'll start off with generic lords and heroes. The community itself has been asking for Skink High Priest for quite some time now, a Skink leader that's also a spellcaster to be able to lead your armies. This is if they want to go more Skink heavy faction focus, which, you know, should be the case when you're playing stuff like Tic-Tac-Toe or Tehenowin and so on. This was never in the tabletop army books. I think in earlier editions there was an option through a White Dwarf supplement, but I'm not 100% too sure. But I imagine that Creative Assembly and Games Workshop want to make the Slann very special, which is why this is not the case. Though I imagine that it could be justified by only giving them the Lore of Heavens and the Lore of Beasts, as that way you still have all the other laws of magic which are only available to the Slann. And in all honesty, this is just an opinion of mine, the Slann should be buffed up a little bit more to make them much more powerful spellcasters, so if you had the option between the Skink High Priest and the Slann, you'd still want to go for the Slann. Other than that, I'd say it's a massive shame that we never got a Lord or Hero choice as a Chameleon Skink, which yes, they weren't part of the tabletop, but considering that the last DLC for the Lizardmen was based on Chameleon Skinks, you know, Oxyotl and so on, it would have been nice to have some themed Lord and Hero choices to kind of go with that, you know, you're stalking demons, you're stalking beastmen and so on, it would just be cool. Plus both Creative Assembly and Games Workshop are not above creating new stuff. It's just a massive shame. Hopefully we can get that in the future, maybe in the form of FLC or something, because it would just be nice and it would flesh out the skinks a bit more. Alright, so now we can start moving to the missing units section, and keep in mind there's going to be a lot of skinks being mentioned in this video. I'm not trying to make it skink heavy, it's just that's pretty much what's missing. So we'll start off with the Skink Horned One and Cold One Riders. This was something from, I believe, 6th edition. It was with the whole Incy-Wincy thing. I wouldn't say it's desperately needed, as really we already have the Horned One Riders, Cold One Riders and so on. But I would say that it would be nice to further flesh out the skinks a bit more, and this is more if you want to just go with a theme. I'm assuming on the battlefield they'll have a light shock cavalry role, which kinda doesn't make too much sense, but I guess also does. It's one of those things. I don't imagine them being picked too often. Mind you, cavalry is not the best at the moment in the Warhammer series, but you never know in the future. Next we have the Colchians. These are Warhammer's terror birds. A lot of tabletop players, such as myself, used to call them dodos back in the day because they weren't entirely useful. I'd been doing so in some videos and people got mad for some reason. I'm assuming that just not in the joke, so yeah. Anyways, so nothing too special about these birds, rather the fact that they are quite fast. Essentially, they'd be, put it like the Chaos Warhounds and so on, it's the same functionality. Though I'd imagine that they'd have Strider and a few other rules to let them move through terrain much quicker, as these creatures are very much used to running through the plains of Lustria. Yeah, there are some plains there through the Colchian Plains. I wouldn't be able to think of anything else to make them more useful, barring the fact of just making them quick like the Warhounds, so you could take out some enemy straggling units, or pin them down, and yeah, just pretty much that. The main difference between them and the Warhounds, however, is that they could be mounted by, you guessed it, skinks. And I'm imagining that this would be possibly the better option than just having the Horned One or Cold One Riders. Incredibly fast birds being mounted upon by skinks who could have access to, say, blow darts and spears. It's easy enough to create one or two variants, and that gives you an incredibly fast cavalry to start moving around with. I'd say that these would be incredibly fast and you'd be able to do quite a lot of hit and run tactics with them. Obviously they would be kind of squishy as they'd have no armor and so on, but even then you could use them, smash in, charge out. You'd be using them to cycle more or less, or just to do some range. I'm imagining firing on the go would also be viable too. It certainly would be different and would change around your playstyle if you have them in your armies, but you never know for the future, I guess. guess. I've seen many people ask online for the Thunder Lizard. Now, this has always been a bit of a strange thing because it's got some lore, but it's never had any illustrations or miniatures. What you're seeing on screen is actually a fan-made thing from an event way back when. But the general consensus is more or less the same. They'd be absolutely massive, and even the Dreadsaurians would be small compared to them. I'm not sure how that could work, as really they've got a bit of a limit in terms of size. I mean, come on, Korlek is tiny and he should be able to dwarf walls, you know? So I'm not too sure what the engine limitations are. I really doubt that we're going to see a Thunder Lizard. I think they have big enough monsters with the Dreadsaurian, and more or less around that size is fine, but they wouldn't do another creature the exact same size, as that kind of defeats the purpose. Plus, at this point, it's more or less easy to tell that it would have the same functionality as a Dreadsaurian. In fact, I think the Dreadsaurian came out later, so possibly what they thought of the Thunder Lizard eventually changed to that of the Dreadsaurian. We do have something now which technically did have a miniature, though it was a kit bash, but it was a GW kit bash. This is the Arcanodon, or Arcanodon, depending on how you want to pronounce it. So funny enough, long time ago, this was supposed to be the original creature that carried the Engine of the Gods. The problem is that I don't think that they kind of progressed with the cast, or maybe the cast broke. There's a lot of rumors surrounding that, but eventually that got moved to the Stegodon. It's perhaps that they were thinking of something too ambitious, because this was around 6th edition, which was a long time ago, and the cast was still pretty ugly looking. They were getting better, but yeah, it wasn't going to look as good as this. So this is a massive creature with an Engine of the Gods. I can imagine that this could be added in as a special thing with a limitation just like the Dreadsaurian, as they are near extinct, I believe, in lore. It's been a while since I've read about them, but even then they don't have a lot of lore. So it could just be a giant, heavily destructive creature, which also acts as a buffer unit. It really much depends. I like the conversion. I think it's really pretty, and it would be cool if we had something like that, but I doubt that we'll see this either. It really depends. Obviously, we have to keep in mind that Old World is in production, and eventually they'll have to look towards the Lizardmen, and oh god, they really need a model update. Like, some of those Sauruses are just old now. The Skinks are a little bit better, but a majority of the Lizardmen stuff really needs a proper update. Now, before we move on to Lords and Heroes, there's a few things I want to talk about, as there's a few things that could be done in the future. Keep in mind that there's a lot of sub-races and factions in the Warhammer Fantasy world. It's because so much stuff was established but never truly fleshed out. In many places throughout Lustria, there is a tribe of warrior women known as the Amazons. And yeah, they're technically allied with the Lizardmen. In fact, they generally work together, but sometimes they do fight. It's one of those weird things where one writer says one thing and another writer says something else, bringing all these retcons and conflicting lore that we know so well in the Warhammer series. I would doubt that we'd ever see Amazons as their own official, fully fleshed out race pack, mostly because, well, we're moving far away from Lustria, which, you know, is a massive shame. But I imagine that creating fully fleshed out races from little bits of lore here and there must not be easy. That's why they needed Games Workshop to help them out with the Vampire Coast and obviously Grand Cafe. Well, they need their final approval anyway, but you know what I mean. So I'd imagine this being introduced as a minor race pack, maybe just 1 or 2 legendary lords and enough roster for something small, with a few Lizardmen stuff being put in between. The only issue I see here is the fact that Amazons are only really in Lustria, unless they change the lore around, which is perfectly possible, where they could easily be put in, say, the Dragon Isles, and if we have Kuresh in the Grand Campaign map, then that works too, as we know that place is kind of full of monsters and so on, and most possibly other lizards and stuff like that. Maybe if the Grand Campaign map has all the Southlands, that could work too. I think there were some Amazons in the Southlands. I think. Obviously, there's a bit of an issue there, as you would require all 3 games to be able to play as them, but I imagine they could think of something around that. I don't know, we're going to have to wait and see. I'm just spitballing here, as the Amazons would be nice. All they really needed is, what, 1 or 2 Lord choices, possibly just 1, a Hero choice 2, which would probably be a Spellcaster like a Shaman, some basic Amazon troops on foot, some mounted, maybe some Battle Cats, and then some feral monsters from the Lizardmen roster. Kind of fits well. It wouldn't be expensive, it would just be a bit cheaper than normal DLC. Well, around a bit more expensive than, say, a Lord pack, but possibly not as expensive as a race pack. I don't know. We'd have to see how that goes. Maybe Creative Assembly would like that idea. I just want more different factions and races coming in, and I know it's very hard to justify a lot of them, but they did say that they have DLC plans for many years, so hopefully this is one of them. But now we can start moving to legendary characters, and there's only a few missing, I'd say. We're not going to go through every single skink or slan, or else we're going to be here for absolute years. And not only that, but, you know, they're all kind of the same. We want variety when it comes to different characters, and I think I can get a few good ones out here. So first up from the army book is Teto, the astral monster of the constellations. You guessed it, another skink, but a really powerful one. You see, this is a skink priest that is so powerful, he's even respected among the slan, and the Saurus even see him as a force to be reckoned with. This is one of the very few, or possibly only skinks that has ever been able to ride upon their own palanquin, and, well, he's very powerful. He's able to read the stars and determine the future, to the point that he is able to see if any catastrophic events are going to happen, and lead armies that way in an effort to stop said events, with many claiming that no battle has been lost if he joins the field, as he knows exactly what the enemy are going to do, and he's a pretty cool character. It's a shame that he wasn't introduced before, as I thought that he'd be great for the last DLC, to be able to then move into the whole chaos of Warhammer 3, as he would be able to predict what is going to happen next. It's a shame, but I imagine that he could be added in the future, maybe close to the Chaos Waste, trying to stop the hordes of rampaging chaos, but we're gonna have to wait and see. He wasn't massively powerful on the tabletop. Well, in a sense, he kinda was, because he had access to the Comet of Cassandora as a bound spell, but in general, he would just be a pretty cool character, and Rule of Cool always works out quite well. You see, all the missing skink units could also be added with him, and that kinda just sorts out everything there. We already have 7 legendary lords for the Lizardmen, and to be honest, we don't really need that much more, though he could be quite well, as he is so drastically different from all the other skink legendary lords, that then pretty much all the bases would be covered in terms of Lizardman diversity, in terms of Lizardmen legendary characters, and then we could just get some legendary heroes after that. I think that kind of solves everything. Jackax the Eternity Warden would be kind of cool too. He's a temple guard, and I know some people aren't too keen on standard melee legendary characters and so on, but he's still got interesting lore. He's supposed to be very powerful, so he's one of those characters that you want to just put in a choke point and have him hold off a whole army by himself. It's just one of those really cool things, and I think it could be done in such a way where he could be introduced as a legendary hero and maybe just take over a specific temple city which has access to a new landmark, and that would then trigger the quest for you. I can already imagine some of his special rules being translated rather well, like for example Ultimate Bodyguard. If he's in an army with a Slan Mage Priest, then he could automatically turn all Temple Guard units unbreakable, which would be kind of powerful, but you know, this type of stuff is only available for one army, so yeah, it kind of works out quite well. He's also able to find any enemies that might be hiding, so he might have high detection to stalk and so on, but the main stuff on the tabletop was that he was able to detect the Night Goblin Fanatics. However, it doesn't work that well for Total War. I just think it'd be quite interesting, and that's pretty much the only reason why I'm mentioning him. Plus, he's got a cool model. It's one of those ones that I actually like painting. Lastly, I'd mention Incy Wincy as a possible legendary hero for the Lizardmen too, mainly because, well, he's got a silly name that everyone would kind of like take the piss out of, but then if you add in, say for example, Jackax, that means that we've covered all 3 bases when it comes to all the different types of Lizardmen. Well, we don't have a legendary hero, Croxigor, but then again we have Nakai as a legendary lord. He'd be kind of cool, as he'd be the skirmishing focusing character, which would have obviously a horned one mount, and you could use him to buff up other horned ones, cold ones, colchians maybe too, keep it in a very style of skirmish army. I'd honestly make him a legendary lord, but like I said, there's already way too many unless they want to keep adding more, but really we're at a point that there's not really that much that needs to be added in. Have him boost up anything that could be a skirmishing unit and try out a different type of army just because he's that powerful at boosting them up and making them viable. That's pretty much the only way I could see it for this character, and with all that being said, like I said, there's so many characters but they all pretty much do the same thing, so I think everything's pretty much done for the Lizardmen, barring one possible DLC. If they want to add in more characters, I'd say FLC works out quite well, but other than that, yeah, the Lizardmen are in a very good place, and this is a really good thing. The only thing that's a bit of an issue is literally just pretty much defensive sieges, as there's no point. I mean, I still find it really weird. You're an army based with big monsters and so on, and yet walls, you know? It's always been kind of bizarre to me how they designed the Lizardmen and didn't think this is going to be an issue. We can't really stick a Carnosaur on the top of a wall. Now, how cool would that would be? Hopefully, Warhammer 3 fix that, and then we don't have to worry too much, but until then, I think everything's fine. They could do with a little bit of a rework too with some other things, maybe new mechanic and so on. But again, that would obviously come around with a DLC, and we're here to talk about the missing stuff, not really what they could do with mechanics. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below, especially if I missed out any characters. There's a lot of stuff that's been added in through the years, but, you know, a lot of stuff got rewritten and changed around into a new unit and so on, or a new character. But yeah, let's start a discussion. I think with this we're pretty much done with the series. I know I'm not talking about Norska, but I'm imagining that Norska needs to be changed around by Games Workshop, and the Vampire Coast could do with something, but really they're just missing characters. Again, it's another race or faction that didn't really have, you know, an army book to actually give them something to work with. But with that, my friends, we've come to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like, or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. In the description section below are various links to different social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and Discord. Also in the description section is an affiliate link with Element Games where you could buy loads of hobby-based products, not just Warhammer, for 10 to 25% off. Making a purchase using that link and also our special code, which is also in the description, supports the channel at no extra cost to you, which we think is rather cool. A big thank you to our patrons. Your support means the world to us. It's amazing that people want to help a small channel like us grow and get to a higher level of content. A big thank you to Gibraltar LUSC, Ryan Bertsche, Andrew Prince, and Okro for subscribing to us at our Fane level. You guys are super cool. And a big thank you to Edward Yule, VS Vasan, Aaron Whitman, and Shaggy for subscribing to us at our King level. Honestly, we can't thank you all enough. And lastly, a big thank you to all of you for liking, sharing, and commenting on these videos. Honestly, it's because of you guys that the channel's been growing at such a great pace lately, so we can't thank you all enough. But with that, my friends, thank you so much for watching once again, and we shall see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.